Hello, I'm Sean Wallis. I'm standing for election for Vice President from Higher Education. I think I'm the strongest candidate in this election and I hope you can vote for me. I think education in the UK is facing a novel and complex crisis. I call this the triple threat and it arises from three sources. The financial crisis of the HE tuition fee funding system, the rise of generative AI tools purporting to replace human knowledge, and the growth of far-right political parties seeking to emulate Donald Trump. These threats interact. The market encourages teaching to the test, AI encourages student cheating, and the far right attack the results, saying, why fund this charade? This cannot mean business as usual. We need to stand up for ourselves, our disciplines, and the very idea of publicly funded and accountable post-16 education and research. Although the crisis is particularly acute in higher education, it affects all sectors. The very idea of an informed and critically educated democracy is under attack, as we can see from the US. UCU cannot afford to be reactive and defensive. Our members in HE are facing massive redundancies. If we want to win the case for funding education properly, we have to take these arguments on. We need to set the public agenda. We need to make a positive argument for education to tackle global problems and to empower humanity to control AI. And we need to stand up against racism and division. That is why I'm standing for election. I'm a trade unionist with a long track record of service to members. Over the last 30 years, I've supported hundreds of members individually. Right now, I'm the UCU branch secretary and national negotiator, an NEC member and the London region secretary. Perhaps most importantly, I know how to organise ordinary members to campaign on their own behalf. I don't have all the answers, but I think I have the practical experience to organise the kind of response we need. My starting point is ordinary members. We are the trade union of publicly funded science and research workers in the UK. We also teach in higher, further adult and prison education. We have dedicated our lives to expanding human knowledge and sharing it with the next generation. We will all need to play our part. We need to mount a grassroots defence of education and science that mobilises our members, our colleagues and our students. In 2016-17, in response to the government's HE White Paper, I was the convener of the Convention for Higher Education, a network that united existing campaigns and learned societies with UCU activists and helped draft an alternative white paper, which was launched in Parliament. We lobbied MPs and Lords and limited some of the worst excesses of what became the HE and Research Act 2017. Since COVID lockdown in 2020, I've helped organise the UCU Solidarity Movement, whose meetings have been an organising and meeting place for union members and reps across branches, meeting weekly for 5 years. Question 1. What political party or parties are you a member of? I have been a member of the Socialist Workers' Party since 1987, only slightly longer than I have been a member of the Union, AUT as it was then, which I joined as a young research assistant in 1989, and then UCU. I'm a founding member of UCU Left, whose members have a wide range of political affiliations, including Labour, Green, Lib Dems, even the occasional ex-Conservative. What unites us is the idea that the union belongs to members. If you want to know what members say about me, you can look at my website, seanwallis.uk, where I have a long list of endorsements from reps, colleagues and branch officers. So, what do I believe? First, I think that ordinary members of staff are the union. Everything we should do should be about giving members a platform to speak up together for their disciplines and subjects, as well as for their working conditions. As a researcher, I've spent most of my working life supporting other research staff in defending higher education. So right now, UCU should be joining the campaign against the recent UKRI budget cuts and standing with astrophysicists and other scientists to oppose them. Early career researchers and professional bodies are mounting a spirited grassroots campaign for science, and they're already making progress. Second, as a socialist, I don't believe education should be a commodity or should be rationed. I think education is a social good. It's a gift each generation bequeaths to the next. Education is the route to social improvement for the individual and for society. I believe in the Robbins principle that everyone who can benefit from HE should be able to attend. I'm an internationalist and anti-racist and through. We have to defend our staff, students and communities and our colleges and universities in the face of a resurgent far-right and fascist threat. Third, I think we have lots of allies. I think that mass higher education is more necessary today than at any previous time in history. We face crises of climate disaster, military conflict and global pandemics. We need to equip the next generation to control AI. Democracy needs an informed and educated electorate. But the market system is pricing working class students out of education. The Conservatives and Reform are already saying the student loan crisis is reason to cut student numbers going to university. We have to demand loan forgiveness and an end to tuition fees as part of campaigning for a sustainable funding model. Finally, I think we have the potential to be a strong trade union, but we have to learn to use our industrial strength effectively. This means not just strike action, but always thinking about the big picture. How do we force the hand of government to intervene and fund the sector properly? Take Dundee UCU. This is a dispute that on paper should not have won, and yet they did. How? By making the attack on the Dundee University a political crisis for the Scottish Parliament. It's the same way that physicists can get back their UKRI funding. Keir Starmer's government will not take us seriously unless we stand up for ourselves. So we have to get back to taking action together across the four nations, bringing further and higher education together in the defence of education, and take that fight to government. It worked for the BMA and resident doctors, it can work for us. Question 2. How should the union tackle increasing workload pressures? First, we have to fight for employment contracts. Fighting over workload is much harder if you don't have a proper contract. At UCL, by a combination of public campaigning, grievances and the law, in 2007, we got all hourly paid lecturing staff onto proper contracts of employment. More recently, UCL agreed to do the same for all PGTAs. You can read how we did this on my website. Second, we have to insist that contractual hours are defined. I was one of the UCL-UCU pay framework negotiators in 2005 who wrote in 36.5 hours a week into everyone's contracts, including academics. We have enforced that limit when we've gone on strike, worked a contract, or taken part in a marking and assessment boycott. It allows us to define pro rata pay hour for hour properly. Individuals may overwork, but the point of a contractual limit is to know the difference between work we do for the employer under our contract and work we choose to do genuinely freely, voluntary labour we do for the love of the job. Third, any campaign must address managing hours while working from home. As we all know only too well, when we work from home, it's harder to say no to that one extra task or stop working when the clock passes 5. Staff have to know when to say no, and we must support them when they do it. So fourth, we need more union reps. And finally, the only person who can say no is you. Managers can put unreasonable expectations on staff, saying things like, these hours are nominal, but you should stay until the work is done, or at this grade, we expect you to work more than your hours. It's unlawful, but unless staff are prepared to stand up for themselves, no toolkit nor rep will do it for them. In my experience, the main thing that gets members to limit their hours of work is when it's part of an industrial action campaign, when work to contract is part of the action short of a strike. We are stronger together. Question 3. What can be done to strengthen workforce democracy and influence in our institutions? A strong trade union branch is the first defence against managers everywhere, but we should also fight for more democratic control over our management. I'll talk about HE, but a similar argument can be made for further and adult education and local authorities. In HE, we're seeing a crisis of governance driven by the market crisis. This has set universities in direct competition with each other. To house students they hope to recruit, university managements have agreed massive borrowing to pay for shiny new buildings and campuses. Governing bodies that now oversee huge debts to banks they must service with interest. This began 15 years ago, but it's not stopped. Today, triggered by government attacks on international students, we're seeing a new drive towards overseas campuses at the expense of UK jobs. Governing bodies see themselves as being in charge of corporations rather than universities. They recruit most of their governors from the private sector. So how do we put this right? In Scotland, they tried legislation, but the crisis in Scottish universities shows this is not enough. I've been involved in a series of campaigns over governance at UCL and have supported others elsewhere. Central to these fights was strengthening the membership and powers of the academic board or senate structures of the university, taking powers back from the managers. At UCL, all professors are automatically members of academic board, but only a few managers are. But it used to be much less democratic. We had to fight to insist that the board could vote on management proposals. And a key reform was when we set up a governance committee, which could see management's papers in advance and draft responses for discussion before they were debated. Many universities do not have these kinds of structures, or if they do, they're stacked with managers. We need academic boards or senates where staff outnumber managers and can challenge governing bodies. So we need to raise members' aspirations. At UCL, we used to say, if it's good enough for Oxford, it's good enough for us. Other universities should say the same thing. If it's okay for UCL to have this level of self-governance, why can't we? Finally, we have to integrate the fight over democracy within our institutions to all the other fights. To fight for jobs, we have to get funding, and to get funding, we need to show it will be spent widely. Corporate managers have brought universities to the brink of bankruptcy. They cannot be trusted to rescue them. Question 4. How will you bring the various groups together and work across differences? I realise that with over 10 years on the NEC, I have more experience than others in this election. It's not always been easy. It's certainly much more testy than, say, my local branch committee. I think this is for a number of reasons. First, we rarely meet informally between meetings. Second, meetings are quite short, opportunities for debate may be limited, and we do not always get through the business. Third, stakes are often very high, and meetings are held away from members and branch delegates. Being a serious trade unionist means working with people with all sorts of ideas. Most of the time, these differences are unimportant compared to the task at hand, but we should be mindful that disagreements are serious and genuine. If elected, I would chair meetings at HEC and NEC. The job of every chair is to get through business. To be honest, that's the number one priority. I also think we can address some of the issues I've just raised by increasing frequency of meetings. We should also strengthen regions, systematically encourage branches to send reps, and call on NEC members to get involved in their region as well as their branches. Question 5. The number of branches fighting for survival increases almost daily. To what extent can we build a national campaign to save our sector, and what elements do you recommend for a successful campaign? We have to do 3 things right now. First, we have to throw ourselves into building solidarity for every branch under attack. Second, we have to build a serious mass campaign, a UK-wide fight, for proper funding for our sector. And third, we have to get back to UK-wide industrial action. I've helped convene the UCU Solidarity Movement for the last 5 years. This has helped delivered practical solidarity to branches week in, week out. There's a WhatsApp and weekly online meeting. A layer of reps and activists come regularly, some more so than others. The link to register is public. Any member in a branch under attack can simply turn up unannounced and talk through what they need. The Solidarity Movement has also been a platform for building UK-wide campaigns, including the recent ballot on pay. So to wrap up, I need to talk about how we get back to UK-wide industrial action. Without it, branches are doomed to fight branch by branch. That means letting employers pick the battle, taking us on one by one, and it does not put pressure on government to bail out the sector. So last year, first out the gate were Brunel, Dundee and Newcastle. The employers went in hard for major redundancies in all 3. Sadly, we lost at Brunel despite the branch fighting heroically. When, against all apparent odds, Dundee won, some other employers like Cardiff, Sheffield and Durham backed off, at least temporarily. Newcastle was still out though, forced to fight on into the summer term. Only at the end of June did the employer throw in the towel. But then other employers began a new round of attacks before the end of the summer term, and here we go again. So how do we get back to UK-wide industrial action to defend the sector? Some have argued we should declare a dispute with the Secretary of State for Education. I don't have a particular problem with this as an idea, though it would be an England-only dispute. There are some legal complications though, but we don't actually need to declare such a dispute to move towards UK-wide industrial action or to create a political crisis in government over university cuts. We did not declare a dispute with USS in 2018, but we still took strike action which forced USS to U-turn. Under current UK trade union law, we have 2 clear, legally well-defined options: to declare a dispute with every employer separately or declare a dispute with every employer together. We could do the first by demanding a commitment to no compulsory redundancies in the coming year. We could do the second by building a campaign over redundancies as part of a national pay claim. Whatever mechanism we use, we need a serious political campaign to put the defence of education on the government's radar. That is the missing element in the union's strategy right now, which is why I've talked about it at length. Finally, we have to address the 2023 MAB. What went wrong? Well, Sector Conference in May agreed to reballot members over the summer, but the HE Committee in June did not implement that decision. Instead, the vote was delayed and talked out by members of the Commons and IBL factions in the meeting. That was both a democratic failure and an industrial mistake that allowed the employers to wait out the MAB. Had the union simply put the reballot in place after Sector Conference, the outcome could well have been different. HEC also failed to implement the conference decision to run the MAB by a national committee of delegates feeding up from branches and holding negotiators to account. We must ensure conference decisions are enacted and commit to grassroots democracy whenever we take any prolonged industrial action. We should put in place a national strike or MAB committee that ensures decisions are made by directly accountable representatives of striking branches. We do this when we fight locally, so why not nationally? We need to learn from our mistakes. We're not a weak union. We face a bigger threat to our sectors than ever before, but if we stand together, we can win. I hope you'll vote for me. Thanks for listening.